Big bailout in limbo. Greece wants a loan from Europe, promising financial reforms, but still without a plan. Francis in Bolivia. The second leg of the Pope's Latin American trip takes him to La Paz and Santa Cruz. Catholic school concerns. Impact of the Supreme Court's redefinition of marriage on Catholic education. And coffee from California? Yep, your next cup of joe could come from this U.S. farm. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, July 8th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. European leaders say time is running out for a bailout deal with Greece. The Greek government wants another loan from Europe to keep that country from economic collapse. Wyatt Goolsby is outside the Greek embassy here in Washington with more. Wyatt?
Brian, the Greek prime minister promises his country will submit new reforms and proposals tomorrow that will be fair to his country. But many of Greece's neighbors are skeptical, saying this could be a step towards Greece's breaking away from the European Union. It's become a new reality for Greeks, the long lines at the ATM to withdraw just 60 euros a day. After years of overspending and mismanagement, Greece is out of money and banks are closing. Since 2000, Greece has already received two massive bailouts worth roughly 240 billion euros. Now the International Monetary Fund estimates the nation will need at least 50 billion more euros. The head of France's central bank says the Greek economy is on the verge of catastrophe. Today, Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras got cheers and jeers as he pushed for a new deal at the European Parliament.
The monies which have been afforded to Greece, which have been given to Greece, never trickled down to the Greek people.
Tsipras insists his country's rejection of reform does not mean a break with Europe, but major European players like Germany remain cautious about sending Greece more money. The cash shortage is a serious frustration for everyone. Maria Sarantakos, who lives in Athens, says one of the biggest concerns is caring for her elderly parents and mother-in-law.
There is a problem with the elderly people because they cannot stay in line for a long time due to the fact that we have summer here in Greece and the temperature is very high.
Despite the turmoil, Maria says she's optimistic things will get better, eventually. Today, the Prime Minister of France says Greece must stay in the Eurozone and they'll do everything they can to help. They said if they're not able to reach a deal and that for some reason Greece leaves the European Union, they said it could spell serious consequences for the region and damage the world economy. Brian?
Wyatt Goolsby at the Greek embassy. Thank you, Wyatt. And U.S. stocks close with big losses today after a technical outage forced the New York Stock Exchange to halt trading for about half the day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 261 points. That's 1.5%. The S&P 500 gave up 34 points. NASDAQ down 87 points, or 1.8%. The New York Stock Exchange described it as internal and not the result of a breach of its systems. The other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Bolivia welcomes the Holy Father as Pope Francis arrives in La Paz today. This is his second leg of his Latin American tour. Before leaving Quito, Ecuador, Francis meets with clergy at the Marian National Shrine of El Quinche. He visits a home for the elderly, operated by the Missionaries of Charity, founded by Mother Teresa. The Pope taking time to kiss a disabled woman and to take a selfie with Ecuadorians. Ahead of his arrival in La Paz, military police patrol the streets as workers set up chairs and banners along the papal route. People here expressing their hope in the Holy Father's presence. A La Paz newspaper vendor saying, "I hope he brings us blessings so that the country can change completely." This Catholic Bolivian prays for peace and light, saying, above all, "I hope that he brings us the blessings of our Lord." After a brief 4-hour stay in Bolivia's capital, the Pope is on to Santa Cruz, where he celebrates a public mass tomorrow. Joining us by satellite from Santa Cruz, Bolivia, Carolina Requena. Carolina is a reporter for our news partner, Prensa. Carolina, what is the atmosphere as the Pope arrives there in Bolivia?
Faith, joy, and encounter. I can say that these are the main words that defines the moment we are living here in Bolivia because of Pope Francis' visit. As it was in Ecuador, the streets are crowded of people who want to receive the Holy Father with a lot of happiness. They are really camping at the street to get a good position, to see him closely and to show him their friendship. Also, there are big signs at the street with the theme of this visit, which is, with Francisco, we announce the joy of the gospel. There are also thousands of young volunteers that have came from different parts of Latin America to help at this great celebration of faith.
Well, the Catholic Church very strong in Latin America, in Bolivia. What does the Church hope this visit of the Holy Father does for the Church and its people there?
They are hoping that the Pope will give them, to the Bolivian people, a message of joy, brotherhood, and mercy. A pastoral agenda, as you can see, mostly focused on the poor, the families, and the environment.
So what does it mean for the people of Latin America for their native son to return to that continent as the Holy Father?
You say, we have to remember he's an Argentinian Pope, a South American Pope. So he knows better the realities, the social problems of the Latin American people. So the expectation is even higher. And this is the second time that Pope Francis is traveling to Latin America. If you remember, he went to Brazil at 2013 for the World Youth Day. So also for Bolivia, this is a very important visit because Bolivia has a population of over 10 million people and where the 77% are Catholics. So for all that, this visit is a great news for the Bolivian people and for the Church.
From Santa Cruz, Bolivia, we thank Carolina Requena for joining us from our news partner, Prensa.
Okay, see you soon.
And when Pope Francis addresses a joint meeting of Congress in September here in Washington, it will be broadcast on jumbotrons on Washington's National Mall. This according to the House Speaker, John Boehner. Boehner says Francis also wants to make a brief appearance outside the Capitol after delivering that speech. The South Carolina House opens debate today on a proposal to remove the Confederate flag from the Capitol grounds there. Lawmakers are under pressure to act after the state Senate overwhelmingly passed its own bill on Tuesday. Governor Nikki Haley supports that measure. Now, if the House approves the Senate's version of the bill, the flag could come down by week's end. If that bill is revised in the House, that process could take much longer. California lawmakers deal a major blow to the so-called right to die movement. The state assembly drops efforts to legalize terminally ill patients ending their own lives. The bill did not have enough support before a planned Tuesday vote. Supporters of that bill say they are prepared to take the issue to voters in a referendum. Joining us by Skype from Sacramento is Lori Hyrup with the Coalition for Californians Against Assisted Suicide. Lori, this bill didn't even get a vote in the state assembly. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because the religious communities within the state also stepped up to battle it, and that created enough of a uproar that they just didn't have the votes to move it forward.
Now, the people who want this are saying that they'll take it to a referendum if they have to. What are the chances of such a referendum passing there in California?
You know, it depends on whose information you listen to. I've heard that 70% of the voters want it to pass. Whether or not that's true is questionable, being that they couldn't even get the votes within the assembly. So it's really a hard call. I know that they're not going to give up. They say they're going to eventually amend it and bring it forward again to the next session.
Well, you have a powerful witness. You have survived several terminal diagnoses. You have disability that requires complete care. What is your message to people who support this legislation?
Doctors are wrong all the time giving a terminal diagnosis. As you mentioned, I've had several when I was 18 months old. They told my mom I wouldn't live a year. I'm 59. I'm the mother of 2, the grandmother of 4, and though I require complete personal care, I was appointed by Governor Schwarzenegger. I was a chief deputy, and life was worth living.
Life is worth living. All right, from Californians Against Assisted Suicide, Lori Hyrup, thanks for joining us from Sacramento.
You are very welcome. Thank you.
Coming up, how does the legal redefinition of marriage impact Catholic education? We visit with an expert at the Supreme Court. And a full year in advance, preparations are underway for World Youth Day in Krakow, Poland. As a university, as educational institutions, as teachers and students, life itself challenges us to answer this question: what does the world need us for? Where is your brother? A quote from Pope Francis addressing educators in Ecuador. Thanks for joining us this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. The recent decision to legally redefine marriage could have drastic repercussions for Catholic education. The Cardinal Newman Society promotes authentic Catholic higher education, and tonight, Jason Calvi visits with the Society's Patrick Reilly outside the Supreme Court.
Patrick, thanks for your time. How do you think the Supreme Court's decision is going to be impacting Catholic schools around the country?
Well, already a week after the Supreme Court decision, a teacher at a school in Macon, Georgia, a Catholic school, who was fired by the school for announcing a same-sex wedding, has filed a federal lawsuit alleging discrimination. So already we're seeing consequences of this ruling, and I think we'll see much more of that.
How does a Catholic school have the right to fire a teacher like that?
Well, they have the right. Legally, I think that will be a battle, but they certainly have the right, and they have the essential standards that every Catholic school ought to have to ensure that its teachers are acting consistently with what they're teaching. So it's absolutely essential to Catholic education that they do that.
Why is that?
Well, a Catholic school teacher, as part of their mission, is required to form young people in the faith, in our Catholic understanding of morals, and it absolutely cannot be divorced from Catholic teaching. So their example is as important as their words.
I know a lot of Catholic parents are worried right now after the Supreme Court's ruling. Do you have a message for them?
Yeah, I think things are very hopeful in a certain respect. I think Catholic education is in many ways a necessary response to the Supreme Court ruling. We have to do a better job of catechesis, and we have many schools, many colleges that are doing a much better job than they were 50 years ago. So it's very exciting. Schooling begins in the home. It has to begin there, and as long as we continue strong Catholic education, I think the Church will be in good shape in one way or the other.
Really, I mean, in this age where culture is opposed in many ways to traditional church teaching, you're still hopeful.
Yes, well, the truth is still the truth, and we have to keep teaching it. We have to teach a new generation. I think it will be a very long time, and I think we're going to suffer a lot. So I don't mean to suggest that we won't. We may not have schools and colleges in the form that we have them now. But Catholic education, as I said, begins in the home. We have to continue it in one form or another, and we will continue it. And there's no one that can take that right and that necessary action of Catholics away from us.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
And Hans von Spakovsky is a senior legal fellow with the Heritage Foundation joining us. Are these lawsuits against Catholic schools legally sound?
I don't think so, but that's not going to stop the lawsuits from going forward, because activists are going to file the suits. They're well funded, and they're also going to have governments like in Oregon who are not favorable to religious schools also going after them.
Let's look at that Daily Signal report recently featuring the Oregon Christian couple that refused to make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple, and they were fined like $135,000. Why is this case so significant?
Well, it shows that people who want to practice their religious beliefs are not going to be able to do it. Their First Amendment rights were clearly violated, fined $135,000. Also, a gag order was imposed on them by an Oregon state commissioner saying that you can't really speak about your religious beliefs and what you think about same-sex marriage.
Isn't that an outright violation of our constitutional rights?
It is, but it didn't stop this particular commissioner from doing it. He was acting more like a politician than the supposed judge that he's supposed to be.
Do you think this couple will fight back, and what has this done to their business?
They're out of business. They had to shut down their bakery. They are having real problems because of that. They are fighting back, but it's been very costly for them.
I wonder, in light of this Supreme Court decision that redefines marriage legally, can religious liberty coexist with this?
Well, it can, but folks on the other side don't want it to. And I think we're in for a very big fight, not just in courts, but in state legislatures all over the country trying to preserve religious freedom.
Is it a fight we can win?
it is a fight we can win. You know, the country was founded on it. I think there are a lot of people that understand how important this is. We just have to, frankly, get charged to conduct a fight against people who are very active and very well funded on the other side.
Hans von Spakovsky with the Heritage Foundation. Appreciate your insight. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, nearly 30 years ago, Pope John Paul II hosted the first International World Youth Day. Every other year since then, young Catholics from across the world have gathered in various cities. Now, the next World Youth Day in Krakow is still 1 year away, but as Catherine Szeltner reports tonight, excitement is already building.
The road to heaven is heaven.
Sarah Perla still remembers the joy she felt at World Youth Day Rome back in 2000.
It just gave me a sense of like heaven is like we're joyful, we're like still considerate of other people.
Officials gave an update on World Youth Day in Krakow, Poland yesterday at the John Paul II Shrine in Washington, a memorial dedicated to the founder of the global celebration. About 2.5 million people are expected in Krakow. Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati and St. Kateri Tekakwitha are among the patron saints for the pilgrims. The John Paul II National Shrine has an entire room dedicated to World Youth Day. You can learn more about past events with their World Youth Day memory table.
Look at this image. Where are all these young people now?
Bishop Frank Caggiano has been to 3 World Youth Days before, but he calls Krakow Mercy Central. It will fall during the Jubilee Year of Mercy, and Poland is home to the Shrine of Divine Mercy.
None of us are perfect. We have all failed the Lord at one time or another. And when young people realize that solidarity means solidarity in grace and just on a human level, that even our failures can give glory to God. What an awesome idea.
Less than 1% of U.S. young adults are expected in Krakow, but Caggiano says those young people can spark a change in the world.
We'll look at it this way. The Lord started with 12, lost 1, and converted a world. Can you imagine what we could do?
Catherine Szeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, we visit the Vatican, where restoration of sacred art takes years to complete. And once thought impossible to grow this far away from the equator, coffee beans now thrive along California's coastline. Beauty is a key to the mystery and a call to transcendence. It is an invitation to savor life and to dream of the future. From St. John Paul II's letter to artists. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Father Mark Haydu is joining us from Rome. He is with the patron of the arts in the Vatican museums. And Father Mark, tell us what the patrons do.
Well, Brian, the patrons are really the main source of income for restoration of the Vatican collection. So the hundreds of thousands of pieces that the Church and the popes have collected throughout the years, we're in charge of preserving them, restoring them, and returning them to their beauty.
Some very exciting restorations going on right now. Can you give us a glimpse of that?
There are some really exciting things going on. For example, we're doing a tapestry by Raphael, designed by him and woven in Brussels, and so that's being restored right now. It's going to be a 7-year process where the nuns in the restoration labs here in the Vatican are world leaders in tapestry restoration. They'll be going strand by strand through a rather large tapestry wall hanging. So that's one. We're doing the Gallery of the Maps, which is 120 meters long, so longer than a football field on both sides of the gallery. 44 murals that are painted with the maps of Italy. That also is coming to a close, and we've been at it for 2 years. And another one that's been fantastic and a great point of devotion is the Holy Stairs, which are the stairs that St. Helena, the mother of Constantine, brought back in the 4th century to Rome. We're restoring all the frescoes there. That's been about a 3-year project as well, and that's one of the most important religious sites here in Rome outside of St. Peter's.
Spending years to restore these projects certainly gives us an idea of how valuable they are to the Church. What does this art mean not only to the Church, but to the world in terms of, maintaining and staying in touch with ancient history?
Well, that's exactly it. The Church maintains her collection because it is the most important, the biggest, the world-renowned collection of objects, sacred objects that show man's relationship with God. every piece in the Vatican collection is a reflection of man's search for God expressed in art. And so it is a documentation of man from the beginning of his artistic creation all the way up into the present day, how he's discovered God and expressed that in art. So it's extremely important for the church to preserve that. Also as a way to dialogue with other cultures. We have sacred art from all of the continents, from all of the peoples across the world. And so how they relate to God and how they express that is amazing, but it's also important as a step into then the evangelization mission of the church to share our message with these souls.
And very briefly, you're now branching out into Asia, correct?
We are. In fact, I've made my first trip to Hong Kong, one of the Philippines, and also Singapore and Malaysia. So if you look at the museums on a daily basis, the number of people that are coming from Asia has increased exponentially year after year. And to think that the church, since Francis Xavier, it went back in the 1500s, has been working at a relationship with Asia, evangelizing, offering our faith, and still the percentage of Christians in that area of the world is quite reduced. And so to see them coming to us now in such numbers is really an invitation, I think, of the Holy Spirit to share our message. And if they're so interested in the beauty of the Vatican collection, that can be a great door to walk through as a bridge, so to speak, with them and say, look at this beauty. Do you know where it comes from? And then start that dialogue. And so that's why we're spreading out into Asia with chapters of the patrons.
Father Mark Haydu with Patrons of the Arts for the Vatican Museum. Thank you for joining us from Rome.
Thank you very much, Brian.
And once thought impossible, a California farmer has created a viable coffee growing operation. Now, this is well outside the traditional mountainous rainforest regions that are closer to the equator. As Mark Irons reports tonight, farmers hope to create a new industry similar to what that region saw with wine decades ago.
It's harvest time on this coffee farm. Bright red cherries that will eventually become a fancy pour-over cup by your local barista. But these are not the tropical mountains of Central or South America, or anywhere else you'd expect coffee to come from. It's a 5-acre hillside near Santa Barbara, California.
Very unique growing condition because of the Pacific Ocean. It's a colder climate coming up to a desert, so we have a lot of fog that comes in.
Once thought impossible to grow this far from the equator, Goodland Organics was the first to figure out that coffee trees can actually thrive along the California coastline. But the critical question, how does it taste? Excellent, according to several trade association ratings and reviews. And these visitors who came to the farm for a tasting and tour?
It tastes very well. It tastes similar to a lot of the Central Americans that I've tasted. It totally blew my mind because all I knew of coffee was that it grew on the equatorial belt of the world.
Since they're not mass-produced, the beans are expensive, more than $60 a pound. But that hasn't stopped the farm from selling the beans as quickly as they can process them to coffee connoisseurs all over the world.
I think the coffee industry is really a very evolving industry. I feel like we're in the wine industry in the 80s.
But growing coffee in California isn't easy. It took about a decade to get the process just right. Unlike traditional coffee grown in rainforest, this farm has to strategically irrigate to deal with the drought. The owner is partnering with other coastal California farms with similar conditions to expand production.
So we're really trying to start an industry here, and we hope this will be a premium, well-recognized growing region in the next decade or so.
Which could really get California coffee off the ground. Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks for joining us. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Tonight, we leave you with these special moments in Ecuador where Pope Francis spent the past few days. Good night and God bless you.